Let's go from Itamar. Chavtasim Abayz. The bottom of the Amud. Itamar, the Gemara is talking about reading Parsha Shkalim. Itamar, Chala Yos Bevatat Tzaveh. If Parsha Shkalim falls on Parshas Atat Tzaveh, which Parsha Tzaveh, okay. So Amar Yisach Nafcha says, Karu Shita mi Vatat Tzaveh. So you have 6 people read from Parshas Vatat Tzaveh ad Kisisa until the end of the Parsha, I guess. Kisisa is the next parsha. So you split the 7 aliyahs of Tetzaveh into 6 aliyahs, and then you have V'chad mikisisa ad v'asisa, and then you have the 7th person read from Kisisa until v'asisa, because Kisisa, the very next parsha is Parsha Shkalim, and you make it into 7 aliyahs. Amr Aryai says, Amri ukumi hu dekam ukmi hasam. He says he just stands there, and the one who was standing there before. Meaning what? People won't realize if you make 7 aliyahs out of the 6 aliyahs of Tetzaveh and the first aliyah of Kisisa, so people aren't going to realize that you just did Shkalim. So instead, that's his critique of it. People umukumihu, they will think that kamukmi hasam, that's where they finish. So it's not going to be an appropriate way of doing shkalim. El Amar Aryai suggested a different way. He said, Karu shita mi ve'atat tzaveh. You get 6 people to read from ve'atat tzaveh ad v'asisa until v'asisa, which is actually already into shkalim, right? So he reads the entire first aliyah of Parshas Kisisa, including in this first 6. V'chad tani v'karei mi v'kisisa ad v'asisa. And then one person comes back, and he comes. Tani maybe means shani. He repeats it. I'm not sure. Tani he teaches. He reads v'karei from Kisisa until V'asisa. He reads the maftir ki'ilu of the same aliyah again, the first aliyah of Kisisa. Meisvei, we're going to challenge this from a brisa. So it says the brisa, Chala yos befarsha smuchala. If it happens to be that Shkalim falls on the Shabbos side, it falls out next to when this is our case, when Parsha Shkalim falls on Kisisa, falls on Tetzaveh, and meaning if Parsha Shkalim falls on the Parsha right next to it, meaning Shkalim is Kisisa, the first aliyah of Kisisa is Parsha Shkalim, because when you count Bnei Yisrael as Shkalim, so if Tetzaveh, the Parsha before, it falls right before, like we're talking about here, Bein milfaneha, Bein lachrea, or actually if it's the following Parsha also, we read it and we repeat it. Okay, so you end up repeating it. You say it twice. So that's exactly what Aryai said, right? Aryai said you split Tetzaveh into 6 aliyahs, read Kisisa as the 7th aliyah, and then read it again as the maftir, right? So that's what Aryai said. You koflinosa means you repeat it. According to Aryai, it's good. What does Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha say? He argues on this brisa. Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is a Tan, isn't he? So just pointing out that it's not the same thing as Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. I'm not sure. I think Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha is a Tana. But then why is Aryai arguing with him? I don't know. Okay, so it's a kasha. Maybe it's an Amora and it's a kasha from this brisa. So the Gemara says, Amar lach Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha. So Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha would say back to you, will Aryai minicha? Is it good for Aryai also? Is it so good? Why? Because what's his problem with Aryai? So he'll point out to you, Teinach lefaneha. So we just explained to it, assuming that it's Parsha Tetzaveh, and then Kisisa is the very next parsha in the Torah. So that's how Aryai explains it, right? But what would he do le'acharel? What would it mean if it's after it? What does it mean? What's the parsha after Kisisa? Vayakel. So what would it mean? You read Vayakel as 6 aliyahs, and then you read Kisisa as the 7th aliyah, and then read it again? Like, what is that? That wouldn't make sense, right? Abayi's only issue was that he didn't want it to look like you didn't add a 7th, you didn't add the last aliyah. But here it would just be like nonsensical to go back and do it twice. It doesn't make sense. Why would that accomplish anything. So what would you say? Kofla b'Shabbosos. When it says kofla, it means you read it on 2 Shabboses. You read it one Shabbos and then the next Shabbos. Meaning what?
It's the regular Shabbos.
Meaning it just means kofla. It just means that you read it 2 weeks in a row. You read it last week because last week was Kisisa, and you read it this week after Vayakol. You read Kisisa. So that's what it means. Kofla doesn't mean you do it twice in one Shabbos. It just means you do it the next week also. So it means the same thing also. If Tetzav is before Kisisa, you just read it. All it's referring to is the fact that you're going to read it on 2 Shabbos in a row.
Right.
It's not a kash and a risak nafcha. Doesn't mean that you have to read it twice on the same Shabbos as the maftir.
Tetzaveh, you wouldn't do that.
Oh, sorry?
Why would you do that on Tetzaveh?
I'm sorry, I can hear.
Why wouldn't you do that on Tetzaveh? How could you do that on Tetzaveh?
You would read it on the second. You read it Tetzaveh and you read Kisisa, and then the next Shabbos you would read.
Why would you need to teach this on Tetzaveh?
But Kisisa is the next part. It's the next week's parsha is Kisisa. It's just pointing out that you would read it a second week in a row. Meaning, don't think you're pat to yourself from reading Kisisa. I guess that's what it is. It's just pointing out that you read it 2 Shabbos in a row. And Rav Yitzchak Nafcha explained that means that you would read it as the 7th Aliyah 1 week, and then the next week you'd read it again as the first Aliyah, and it's not such a problem. Okay, so another issue that can come up with Shkalim. Says the Gemara, what if Parsha Shkalim falls in Kisisa itself? Meaning the first Aliyah, Rishon, is the same thing as a Maftir is going to be today. Right? So it's like a interesting thing. What do you do? Amar Rebbe, Karu Shita Min V'Asisa Ad... Sorry. Amar Rebbe Yitzchak Nafcha. Karu Shita Min V'Asisa Ad Vayakel. So first you have 6 people read from... They skip the first Aliyah. Okay? You skip Kisisa, Esrosh B'nai Yisrael, because they can read it as the Maftir. So skip the whole Aliyah and start with V'Asisa, which is the beginning of Sheni, I guess. Start with that, and you read until Vayakel, read to the end of the Parsha. And you call 6 people for that, and then for the 7th Aliyah, V'chad Karim Kisisa Av V'Asisa. And then you have the 7th guy rather, come and read the first Aliyah. You roll the Sefer Torah back a little bit, or maybe take it a second Sefer, and you read the first Aliyah. So Masif La Abai doesn't like that. Because Hashta Amrei, people are going to say, they're afraid with the car. They're going to say you're reading out of order. I'm not sure what it means. Hashta Amrei, people will say, you're reading it out of order. I guess maybe it's not such a problem. Only people will think it's a problem. Anyways, Abai doesn't like it because you're reading it out of order. Ella Amr Abai, again, Abai is the one who has problems with these issues, and he comes up with new solutions. So Abai, and he's arguing now on, again, Rabbi Yitzchak Nafcha, right? Ella Amr Abai, Karu Shita Ad Vayakel. Split the laning up into 6 pieces, and you read the whole parsha until Vayakel. However you're going to split it up, fine. V'chad tani v'kari maybe kisisa avasisa, and then you have the 7th guy come and make the maftir aliyah, but it's not making it like we use the maftir as the 8th, but here they're using it as the 7th. The 7th Ola is going to read from the maftir portion from kisisa, so you'll read it twice. And Tanya can say the Abai. There's a brisa that supports Abai. The brisa says, "Chala yos bekisisa atma." If Parsha Shkalim falls in Kisisa itself, korinasa v'koflinasa. You read it and you repeat it. Right. This is the same lashon as the previous brisa, like korinasa v'koflinasa. But this means something else this time. Right now, it means that you actually read it on the same Shabbos. Okay. Okay. So back to what the Mishnah had said. Chal yos b'soch Shabbos. Makdimim l'Shabbos l'Sha'avra. L'Shabbos Sha'avra. If Rosh Chodesh Adar we're talking about fell during the week, B'soch HaShabbos, so then Shkalim is advanced to the previous Shabbos, the Shabbos before Rosh Chodesh. Okay, Itamar. So it was said in the academies, Rosh Chodesh Adar Shachal Yos B'Erev Shabbos. If Rosh Chodesh Adar fell out on a Friday, Erev Shabbos, or maybe it says here on the eve of the Shabbat. Yeah, on Friday. So when do you read Shkalim? So Rav Amar Makdimin. Rav says we read it on the previous week, because that's what we just said. If it falls during the week, like on a Friday, so you read it on the previous Shabbos, right? Shmuel Amar Ma'achirim. We read it on the next. We read it on that Shabbos, meaning Friday Rosh Chodesh. We read it on Shabbos the next day. So the Gemara says, Rav Amar Makdimin. Rav says we make it earlier. Dim Kain, because if that's what you do, if that's where it's happening, or rather, if you were to do like Shmuel, then Tzvi lehu yomei shulchanos, then you're going to end up with the number of days. The day. So recall why we read Parshas Kisisa. There's a few reasons that Kisisa is about the counting of the Bnei Yisrael. They needed to count Bnei Yisrael with their money, with the hashgalim, to use that money to buy korbanos for the entire year, and the korbanos, that new regimen of korbanos money was needed at the start of Rosh Chodesh Nisan. That's when the new korbanos were brought from. So you needed a month in advance to collect that money. So you'd announce it, right? That you'd announce the shkalim to collect shkalim already on Rosh Chodesh Adar. So as a zecher for that, we read Parsha Shkalim around Rosh Chodesh Adar. Okay, so we like to read it on Rosh Chodesh Adar. That'd be great, but that's not Shabbos always. So if it's not Shabbos, so when do you do it? So that's Machokas for Rav and Shmuel. So, or the Gemara rather says you read it before Rosh Chodesh, right? The Gemara says if it happens to be that Rosh Chodesh falls in the middle of the week, which is most of the time, so then the Mishnah had said you would bring it to the Shabbos before. But now what if it happens on Friday? So Shmuel then says, okay, make it a day later, not such a big deal, right? Rav says, it is a big deal. You're losing days now. You need enough time to collect all that money, at least to start collecting. It might take you months to collect all that money from all of Eretz Yisrael, but at least start as soon as possible. So Rav says, that's his criticism. You don't have enough time to collect the money for the money changers, the shulchanos, the tables, to collect that money. Shmuel Amar Machari, no, he says you can push it off. Amar Lach, sof chameser b'ma'alei Shabbos mikla. He says that Rosh Chodesh is going to be on a Friday, so the 15th of the month is also going to be on a Friday. So the money changers won't start going out to collect money until Sunday anyways. So you'll end up being Shkalim will precede their arrival by 2 weeks. Hilkach Ma'achron. You can push it off anyways. He said there's enough days because of the days of the week, how they work out, it won't really be a problem.
You don't lose any days.
Yeah.
They anyway start on Sunday.
Okay. The Gemara then examines this dispute in light of the Mishnah. Tanan. The Mishnah said, right? If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out in the middle of the week, makdimin l'sha'avar. So we bring it earlier, right? Umafsikin l'shabbos acheres, and we'll interrupt the 4 parshias on the next Shabbos. Ma'alev afilu be'erev Shabbos. Shouldn't it be the same? Doesn't it include if it falls out on a Friday? Like why is there a discussion of Rav and Shmuel here? What had happened all of a sudden that they're discussing this? You'd think that Rav is right? It just says you bring it earlier. So the Gemara comes to help out Shmuel. It says, "Lo, b'socha Shabbos dafka." It means dafka in the middle of the week, but in Neshama it fell on a Friday, which is at the end of the week. So then maybe there's a discussion of Rav and Shmuel. So the Gemara wants to now and try and solve it to the Brisa. Tashma, who's right? Rav or Shmuel? Let's see. It says, Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona. What is the first week of the Daled Parshios? Kol shel Rosh Chodesh Adar le'yos b'socha. So any week where Rosh Chodesh Adar is in that week. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, even erev Shabbos. Then that if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls in that week, then that coming Shabbos is going to be the first of the Daled Parshios, which sounds exactly like Rav, right? My love afilu be'erev Shabbos dumin desocha. Doesn't it mean that even if erev Shabbos falls within it, including if erev Shabbos, even if whenever Rosh Chodesh Adar falls within it, even if it's erev Shabbos, dumin desocha. Just like if it falls on a Wednesday, so if it falls on a Friday, that's the same thing. Ma tocha makdimi. Just like if it was on a Wednesday, you should have done it already on the previous. You should have done shkalim on the previous Shabbos. So af erev Shabbos makdimi. So if it falls on a Friday, 2 days later, it should also have done the previous week. So Amar Shmuel says no. You don't have to read it like that. You can say, "Ba." If it falls, if you read the Brisa instead of saying like this, "Ezu hi Shabbos Rishona, Kol shel Rosh Chodesh Adar le'yos ba." Whatever Rosh Chodesh Adar is in it, on any Shabbos on which Rosh Chodesh Adar falls, he wants to read it as saying any Shabbos on which if Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on Shabbos. And also, even if it falls on erev Shabbos, that's how he reads it. And that's also how the house of Shmuel read it, in the academy of Shmuel. So the Gemara ends up saying Kitanai. So really this might be the same thing as Machlokas Tanaim. Which as follows. It says in the Brisa, Misargin the Shabbosos. We alternate the Shabboses. Of the first two of the four portions, meaning the first two parshas of the Dala parshas, Shkalim and Zachor. So that a Shabbos on which no portion is read intervenes between Shkalim and Zachor. So those two you can have interruption between. Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi. So Yehuda Nasi says you can interrupt between those two. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer and Misargin. No, we don't have any breaks. They have to be read one after the other. So Amr Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Amosai ani Omer ein Misargin. When do I say you're not allowed to make any breaks? That's the second day, right? Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar said, why are there no breaks? That's when Rosh Chodesh Adar falls on a Friday, on Erev Shabbos. And then in such a case, you would end up reading, I guess on the next day, you'd read, on that Shabbos you'd read Shkalim, and on the next Shabbos you'd read Zachor. According to the other sheet that we're going to say, last week you read already, we'll see. Last week you would have read Rosh Chodesh, you would have read Shkalim, and then this week you're going to read nothing, I guess, and the next week you're going to read Zachor. So let's see. If it falls out any time during the week, then Makdim v'Korei Mishabbos She'avra. Then you would would have made it earlier and read from the previous week. Aval Pish to Shavat, even though it's still a month of Shavat, and you wouldn't think to read Parsha Shkalim in the middle of Shavat. So this seems to be the same Machlokas. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar is holding that you would, by making this break, you end up reading Parshas Shkalim a week behind. It seems to be totally on the following on Erev Shabbos. So this Machlokas Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi and Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar seems to be the same Machlokas Rav and Shmuel. Okay. Maskana, we do make a break, right? The Maskana looked like Makdimi, we make it earlier. Okay. So the Mishnah had said, Bashniya Zachor, the second week is Parsha Zachor. Okay. So it says Brisa Itamar, or said in the academies. Purim Shachal Yos be'erev Shabbos. Purim falls out on an Erev Shabbos, on a Friday. So Parsha Zachor is supposed to be the Parsha before Purim, right? We want to read that before Purim, because Zecher Amalek and Purim is also Zecher Amalek. Okay, so if Purim is going to be on, Purim again is going to be on Erev Shabbos on a Friday. That means Friday is Yud Dalid, Tesvav or Yud Dalid Adar. Okay. So Rav Amar Makdim Parsha Zachor. Rav says we bring Parsha Zachor to the previous Shabbos because we don't want you to read. We don't want you to read Parsha Zachor on let's say Yud Dalid is Purim, right? So we don't want you to read Yud Dalid is Purim, and that's a Friday. So Rav says so obviously you're going to read Parsha Zachor on the 7th of Adar. On the 8th of Adar, thank you. And Shmuel says, Ma'achrin, no, we'll read it on Tesvav. We'll read Parsha Zachor on the very next day. That way we'll have Purim and Zachor beside each other. And Rav says, no, it has to be Zachor, has to be before Purim. So we're going to go through both positions now. Rav Amar Makdim, Rav says you have to bring it before. Because you have to have, you don't want to have the asiyah, the enacting of Zechel Amalek, of reading that Parsha before the you don't want to have the enacting of Purim before the Zechira of Parsha Zachor, which recounts the idea of Amalek. We want to first read the Parsha and then actually do it, then experience Purim. So Rav doesn't want you to read Parsha Zachor after Purim. Which Shmuel Amar Me'achrin says, no, you're allowed to read it afterwards. You can read it you can read Parsha Zachor the very next day. Amar Lecha, why is it okay? Since you still have the cities like Yerushalayim, any of the cities that have a wall around it, they're going to read it on the 15th. So the Nasiyu Zechira B'Hadeh Hadadeh Ka'asyan. Then you can have the Zechira Parsha Zachor and the Asiyah of Purim, experiencing Purim on the same day, and that's good enough. When that happens, we read. When does Yerushalayim read the Megillah? Not on Shabbos, right?
No, I think
Read it on Yadalit, no? You can't read it on the next day anyways, right? It's too late. Okay, I'm not sure what Shmuel wants from that, because doesn't compute. I don't know. Okay. But apparently that's what he holds. So the Gemara now wants to answer who's right. Tanan. But Shni is Zachor, and the second one we read Zachor. The second of the 4 parshas is Zachor. V'ha ki mikla l'reish yarcha b'Shabbos. But when Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, then mikla Purim be'erev Shabbos. Then Purim is going to be on if Rosh Chodesh is if Aleph Adar is Shabbos, so then Ches Adar will be Shabbos, and then Tesvav Adar will be Shabbos. So Yudalad Adar is going to be a Friday, right? So Mikla Purim be'erev Shabbos. So Purim is going to fall on a Friday. The Kasani Mishniyah Zachor, and the Mishnah says that the second Shabbos is going to be Zachor. So it sounds like Rav, right? Rosh Chodesh Adar was Kisisa. The Shmona B'Adar is Zachor, and then 7 days later is 6 days later is going to be Purim. So it's perfect. That's Rav. So Amar Papa, my Shnia. So maybe he says Rav Papa says, well, what does the second one mean? Shnia leHafsaka. It means the second one after the break. So no, maybe you break on the 8th day, do nothing on the 8th day of Adar, Shabbos Shmini Adar, and then comes Yodalad Adar. You'll read Megillah. That's a Friday, and then Shabbos you'll read Zachor. So it could be that's like Shmuel. Okay, so let's try and prove it again. Tashma, learn a brisa. Ezu Shabbos Shnia. What's the second week of the Dal Parshas? So what is the second week? Says the brisa. Kol shachal Purim liyos v'socha. Any time in any week that Purim falls in that week, that's the Shabbos. You're going to read Zachor before it. V'afilu be'er Shabbos. And even if Purim falls on a Friday, you should have read. The implication is you should have read Parsha Shkalim. If you should have read Parsha Zachor 6 days before that on Shabbos. That's like Rav. So now we're going to try and explain the brisa. My love erev Shabbos dumi desocha. Right? Doesn't this mean like what we think it means? That just like if it fell on a Wednesday, you should have read Zachor on Shabbos. So if it fell on a Friday, you should have read it on Shabbos. So where it says ma tocha makdim, just like if it was on a Wednesday, makdim, it should have been on the previous 3 days earlier. Erev Shabbos makdim. So too if it was on a Friday, it should have been 6 days earlier. It should have been in the week preceding that week. Right? That's the Pashim Shas. Amar Shmuel. Shmuel says, bah. Shmuel has a similar answer that has to be but. Any Shabbos on which Purim, that he just amends the brisa and he just reads it differently. That it says, if Shabbos falls on Purim itself, right, and also even if it falls on Erev Shabbos, he just adds this whole piece that implies the way he reads it. That's also how they taught in the Academy of Shmuel. It had the word ba, and therefore it wasn't the kash on him. Okay. So let's discuss another time when Parsha Zachor is read. Chol yos b'Shabbos atzma. What if Purim falls on Shabbos itself? That means Yudalit is Shabbos, and Vav is Shabbos, right? So the Divrei Kol Ches and 7 is okay. So Amarav. So if Parsha Zachor falls on Yudalit, so in Amarav Huna the Divrei Kol en makdimin. So then everyone holds you don't bring it the previous week, you just read it on Shabbos Purim, and the Megillah is done on Tesvav. This never happens, I don't think, right? It doesn't happen in our calendar. Right? No, in Israel, Tesvav happens on Shabbos, but never happens, Gedalia happens on Shabbos.
Yeah, so it never happens then.
Right. That's what it says, yeah?
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But it could happen on a calendar when it theoretically could happen. So no one says you read Zachor the previous week. You read it on that Shabbos. Rav Nachman Amar Adain he machlokas. Rav Nachman says no. There's still machlokas that Rav would say read it on the previous Shabbos, and Shmuel would say read it on the that Shabbos itself. That's the same machlokas. Erev Shabbos and Shabbos itself is the same thing. And Itamar Nami, we know this is indeed the case, that Rav still maintains the machlokes. It's not just a machlokes if it falls on a Friday, but even if it falls on Shabbos itself. Amar Bechia bar Abba, Amar Rabbi Abba, Amar Rav. So it was said in the name of Rav that Purim Shachal Yos B'Shabbos Makdim V'Korei B'Shabbos Avar Zachor. You read Zachor on the Shabbos before it. So it's the same machlokes. Okay, back to the Mishnah B'Shlishi Para Aduma. The third Shabbos is Parshas Para. Tana Rabbanim is Tana Brisa. So when do we read Parshas Para? Ezu hi Shabbos Shlishis, which is the third week. Kol she'smucha lePurim mi'achareha. It's the very next parsha. So Zachor is the one right before Purim, and Para is the one right after Purim. Sound that there's no break, right? So Itamar says in the Raizel, Rabbi Chama bar Rabbi Chanina Amar, Shabbos hasmucha leRosh Chodesh Nisan. So Chama and son Chanina said the real time to read the bigger consideration of when to read Parshas Para is not the one right after Purim, but it's really the Shabbos right before Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Velo pligi, but apparently it's not a machlokas, says the Gemara. Had ikla Rosh Chodesh Nisan b'Shabbos. Rabbi Chama bar Chanina only said that when Rosh Chodesh Nisan is going to be on a Shabbos. But if not, had ikla b'Emsa Shabbos. But if it's going to fall in the middle of the week, then the real consideration is just to make sure that you have it the parsha after Purim. Okay, but Revius, the fourth one, Achodesh Zelachem. The fourth one is Parshas HaChodesh, which is the first Shabbos of Nisan, right? Or it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan. Yeah? Or it's Rosh Chodesh Nisan? No, we just said it can't be that. We said that if Rosh Chodesh Nisan is Shabbos, then that's Parshas Para. Okay, fine. So, HaChodesh Zelachem, Parshas HaChodesh. So, Tana Rabbanan, Tana Brisa. We've read most of this Brisa already. Now we're going to see this whole Brisa that we've been quoting from this whole time. Rosh Chodesh Adar Shachal Lios B'Shabbos. If Rosh Chodesh Adar falls out on a Shabbos, then Korin Kisisa, we read Parshas Shkalim Kisisa. Umaftirin B'Yehoyada, we read the Haftorah from Yehoyada, which is in, not sure, I wasn't there. What? Menachem. Okay. Ve'ezu hi Shabbos Rishona, and what is the first Shabbos? Kol shachal Rosh Chodesh Adar lios b'socha. Any Shabbos where you have Rosh Chodesh Adar is in that week. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, even if it falls in erev Shabbos, which we usually kept having machlokas how to read this brisa according to Rav and Shmuel. But anytime if you have Rosh Chodesh Adar in that week, so then you should read Parshas HaChodesh that Shabbos. Before it, right? You should read Rosh Chodesh Adar. If Rosh Chodesh Adar is going to be next week, you should read Parshas HaChodesh the previous Shabbos. The affiliate bear Shabbos, even if it falls on a Friday, you should have read it 6 days ago on Shabbos. Bashniya, or 7 days ago. Bashniya, the second one is Zachor. Maftir Pakati, and you read the Parshas Zachor from Shaul when Shaul was failed to kill Amalek properly, right? So that's the Haftorah. Ve'ezu Shabbos Shnia, when does it fall? Kol shechal Purim lios b'socha. Anytime you have Purim in that coming week, va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, even if it's on a Friday, you should have read Parshas Zachor in the previous Shabbos. I'm just reading it like Rav because I think that was the parsha we're reading it, and I think that's how we pass it also. Bashlishi Para Aduma, the third parsha is Para Aduma of Turin, and the Haftorah is the Rakti Aleichem, and I will spritz onto you. Is that Yecheskel? Yeah, Yecheskel. And that's talking about the Messianic era, okay? And how do you calculate the third parsha? Ve'ezuhu Shabbos Shlishis Kol she'smucha lePurim yachareh. That's going to always be the parsha right after Purim. So there's not going to be a break between Zachor and Para. There's never a break there. But Revi'is HaChodesh Hazeh, and the fourth one's going to be a Chodesh Maftirin Komar Hashem, and the Haftorah for that is thus says the Lord. Elokim b'Rishona be'Echad LaChodesh. Sorry, Komar Hashem Elokim b'Rishona be'Echad LaChodesh. With Cheskel also. Okay. Ve'ezu Shabbos Revi'is. What is that? How do you calculate when the fourth Shabbos is? Kol shechal Rosh Chodesh Nisan lios b'socha. Whenever Rosh Chodesh Nisan is in that week, you should have read it already the previous Shabbos. Va'afilu be'erev Shabbos, even if it's on a Friday, even if Rosh Chodesh Adar Nisan is going to be on a Friday, you should have read it 6 days earlier on that Shabbos. Okay. And then said the Mishnah, B'chamishis Chozrin l'kachidron. On the fifth Shabbos, we go back to the regular order of the parshas. Nothing confusing happens anymore. We just read the parsha, we read the maftir, read the haftorah, whatever, and nothing special. Okay. So what does it mean, the chasidron, the regular order? The seder mai, what's their order? So Rabbi Ami Amar, the seder parshas hu chozir. You go back to the normal order of the weekly parshas. because since on the Shabbos of the 4 parshas, the regular weekly parsha was suspended, and only the special portion relevant to that Shabbos is read, according to Rashi. Okay, so apparently the assumption was that they actually didn't read the Parsha Shavua. I don't think that's an implication. I'm not sure why. But we said before that if Parsha Tetzaveh falls there on Kisisa, then you read Tetzaveh and then you read Kisisa. I don't know. Okay, I'm not sure quite what it means, but you go back to the regular order of the Parshas. Rabbi Yirmiyah Omar the Seder Haftaras v'Chozer. Rabbi Yirmiyah says no, it means you go back to the Haftaras, right? If you look in the back of the Chumash after the Parsha, we all know that on the special Parshas you have to flip to find the Parsha Shkalim, to flip to find the Parsha Zachor. But and if it's not a special Parsha, then you'll just have the regular Haftarah printed in the back of your Chumash, or in the back of your Parsha, in the back of the Seder of the Parsha. So you go back to the regular Seder of the Parshas, says Rabbi Yirmiyah. So the Machlokas of Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Yirmiyah, again, we didn't really quite understand what Rabbi Ami meant, because it sounded like we were reading the whole parsha anyways, but maybe we weren't. Maybe Taka, for 4 weeks, those 4 weeks not in a row, but we suspend the Seder Parshas. What?
There's a sheet, he just did the...
Yeah, we just read that. We read Shkolim. It's a long parsha. You can split it up into 7 pieces, I guess, for the Shabbos. You want to split it into 7, and you may have to repeat a little bit, but apparently that's what Rabbi Ami held that they did. So Amar Aryai wants to resolve the machlokas. Kavasei Rabbi Ami mistabra. He says Rabbi Ami actually makes more sense. This is not, because it says in the Mishnah, Kol mafsikin, for all of the chagim we stop. Meaning, I think it means that if Chol HaMoed, or the Chag falls on Shabbos, you don't read the regular Parsha Shavua, you read the Yontav reading or the Chol HaMoed reading. The Rosh Chadashim, for Rosh Chodesh, L'Chanukah L'Purim, L'Tanis, U'Ma'amados. Ma'amados is an old minhag we don't do anymore, I think, right? Fasting on Monday and Thursdays. Okay, so we're on fast days. Which is a Gemara in Tainus, I think, I guess. Okay. Well, the Yom Kippurim, entry Yom Kippur. What? A kol mafsikin. Or for everything. If any of these days fall out on Shabbos, we actually would interrupt the regular Seder of the Parshios, and we'd read Chanukah on Shabbos Chanukah. We wouldn't read regular Parshios. Usually it's Kitetse, or usually it's BAYT, but instead of reading BAYT, you would read from Parshas Naso. You read all those Parshas, and then you go back to...
We're talking here about the weekday readings. Monday or Thursday.
Oh, interesting. That's what it says?
Morning reading that Parsha, and do the Rosh Chodesh or Chanukah.
It's Tawai Monday, Thursday.
Because we don't suspend the Shabbos Parsha.
Members of the mind would assemble. No, I'm saying this is not like this. The way we're understanding the Brisa right now is not like you're saying. Maybe that's what we're going to say afterwards. But I think right now we're trying to say like Rabbi Ami, that we interrupt the Shabbos Parsha for Zach, or we interrupt them for. I hear what you're saying, but I think that's Abai is not using it for that. Abai is using it for this shocking conclusion. The shocking conclusion that you would, if Rosh Chodesh falls on Shabbos, you would actually just read something about Rosh Chodesh. You'd read the Rosh Chodesh reading, which we have trouble making 4 aliyahs out of, and you need to make 7 aliyahs out of it somehow. Okay. But the problem with understanding like that is that ma'amados happen on Mondays and Thursdays, by definition. So they don't happen on Shabbos. So what does that mean? So the Gemara says, Bishlam Alaman de Amar L'Seder Parshios U'Chozer. According to the view that you go back to the regular Parshios, Hainu De'ika Parsha B'Chol. That only makes sense if you're talking about a weekday Parsha, like Mondays and Thursdays. According to Rabbi Ami, our Mishnah teaches that I'm just reading footnote number 7. Yeah. It's exactly like we were saying, that Monday and Thursdays it has to be. They were talking about interrupting Monday and Thursday, that you would read Ma'amados and you'd read Yom Kippur and you'd read all those other things on it also, but not that's talking about Shabbos. But according to the one who holds that you go back to the Seder of the Haftaros, then Haftarah B'Chol Mi'ika. But then why would there's no Haftarah on the Chol? So this brisa, which implies that you would resume the Seder of the readings, that lashon can't be referring to the Haftarah because it's talking about Mondays and Thursdays. So the Gemara then, that's a kasha on Rabbi Yirmiyah. But then Rabbi Yirmiyah would say, "V'idach hakedeisa v'hakedeisa." We're talking about different times of going back to the order, right? This brisa was talking about we resume the order, talking about the order of Mondays and Thursdays. And this one's going back to the order of which is talking about going back to the Haftorahs. Or the other way around. Haftorahs and Mondays and Thursdays. Don't confuse, just because it says you interrupt the order, or you go back to the order. Like, just because we're talking about mafsikin doesn't mean that we're talking about being mafsik for the same thing, I guess. Right? But it means, it says here, when the term order in the clause, we resume the order, is interrupted as it is, like in regard to the situation detail to which it refers. Okay, footnote number 8. This clause discusses the reading of the 4 parshas on the Shabbos. Since the Haftorahs are part of the regular Shabbos order, we may interpret order in this clause referring to the Haftorahs. And we go back to and then we assume that the weekly Torah readings is left intact. Okay, and then this time when we talk about order in this brisa, we interpret it talking about during the week on Mondays and Thursdays. Right. So reading the square footnote and the square brackets in footnote number 9, Rabbi Yirmiyah maintains that generally the reading of the regular Torah portion is disturbed only when it is absolutely essential to accommodate a periodic reading. However, since it's sufficient to read just the 4 portions of the maftir on the Dalet Parshas, so then only the order of the Haftorahs has to be interrupted, and then we go back to the order of the Haftorahs. Regarding the weekday reading, so then in Echanami, on the weekdays you would accommodate the periodic Chanukah Purim in order to make out, and you wouldn't read the Mondays and Thursdays regular reading of that week's Parsha. Like, that's what we do. So the Gemara, this is just his answer. And this is the halacha, this is what we do. Okay. The Gemara is now going to ask a question, though, on Rabbi Yirmiyah, and it says, on a fast day, why do you, let's say a fast day is on a Monday, so why should we interrupt? In the morning you should read, I don't know, whatever the parsha of the week is. Akev, if it's fast, you read Akev in the morning, and then a mincha, there's another Torah reading. You don't have to push off the Torah reading of Monday. You can just read the tiniest one of mincha, but you're going to read anyways at mincha. That's what we do, right? We read Shacharis and mincha, the same Torah reading, and then just happens to be the Haftorah. That there's a Haftorah in the mincha, but it's really the same Kriyas Torah. So why don't you just do that? Why would you interrupt the Torah reading? Misaya le Rav Huna. So this apparently supports Rav Huna. Amar Rav Huna mitzafra kinufia. On the morning of a fast day, there's a special idea to have an assembly in honor of the fast day, and therefore I guess it would be inappropriate to be reading the Parsha Shavua as the normal Parsha. You'd want to read something special for the fast day, for the tshuva idea, for that idea of fasting. Okay, so now this is how it would work then on a fast day. Hey Chavdinan, how would we conduct ourselves on a fast day? Amar Abai mitzafra lefalge diyoma, from morning until midday. Ma'ayininan b'mile demasa, you scrutinize the affairs of the town. Okay, somehow you do prepare for tshuva. But looking for any chaim you have to fix in the town. Mipalge diyoma lefania riva diyoma, from midday until mid-afternoon, a quarter of the day, riva diyoma, quarter. Kurinan umaftirei, we read from the Torah and conclude with the Haftorah. Uriva diyoma bar rachame, and then after a quarter of the day, and for that last quarter of the day, we ba'u rachame, we daven for rachman. We ask for rachman. Shneamar, pasuk says in Nehemiah, it's called Ezra really. Vayikre'u v'sefer Torah Hashem Elokehem Revi'is Hayom Revi'is Misvadim Uv'Ishtachavim. So you'll read from the Sefer Torah of Hashem a quarter of the day, and a quarter of the day you'll do vidui and bow. So that means that for the last half of the day, a quarter of it is a reading from the Torah and the Haftorah, I guess, and a quarter of the day is vidui and hashish tachava. So the Gemara then wants to know, how do you know it's talking about the second half of the day? Right? We just said the first half of the day, the entire morning we spent scrutinizing the city, and then the last half of the day we split into 2 quarters. But maybe it should have been the first 2 quarters of the day is talking about the pasuk, and the last half of the day is free time. I don't know, whatever the last half is, but why should you assume that the first half of the day is talking about why would you assume the first half of the day is what we said it was, and the second half of the day is these 2 quarters? So let's look at that. I don't think that says the Gemara. Techsiv says in the pasuk, "Ve'elai yasfu kol chareid b'divrei Elokei Yisrael al ma'al hagolah v'ani yoshev b'mishamim ad leminchas ha'erev." pasuk says, this is also in Ezra, and around me gathered all those who hastened at the word of God of Israel concerning the transgression of the exile, while I sat stunned until the afternoon offering. So apparently there was this stunned thing until the afternoon. And from the afternoon I got up. So from that we see that, and apparently the pasuk continues and says,
last quarter of the day is prayer.
in the next pasuk says, in the mincha of the erev I got up from my tinus, ubekari bigdi, and I tore my clothes, umeili, and my jacket, ve'echra al birkai, ve'efrasha kapai. So I was humble to my knees, and I spread out my hands, el Hashem Elokai. So I extended my palms to Hashem, my God. So that's what Ezra had said, apparently, and hence, so that sounds like the Psukim are telling us that the last quarter